Hello and welcome everyone to our workshop today, How to Use Your Story to Create Videos that Guarantee Impact. I'm your host, Cheryl Tan, and our guest expert today is Porsché Mysticque Steele. You're going to enjoy this today so very much. We already have folks joining us and letting us know where they are joining us from. So if you're joining us now, let us know where you are from. Lanisha is saying hello from Southern Maryland. Mama Vega is coming in from Bakersfield, California. Taylor joining us from Gilbert, Arizona. Awesome. Keep it coming. Let us know where you're coming from and let us know what you do for a living. That's really part of our story, isn't it? We all know the value of a good story. We know how stories create relationships and connect people with each other. A good story can help you become memorable. As some of you know, I'm a former TV journalist, and after having interviewed thousands of people while on the job, I truly believe everybody has a story to tell. Today, Porsché is going to help you figure out the stories to tell in your life that will create the most impact. She is an award-winning book coach, TEDx speaker, an independent book publishing expert, and CEO of Mystique Rose Publishing Services. So I want to talk about the format for today's workshop. Porsché will share her insights, and I will be here to make sure your questions are answered. So if you have a question for Porsché, please type a Q in the comments and share your question, and I'll make sure she sees that, and we'll have a conversation about that. As for me, I work with coaches, consultants, and corporate executives to help them show up with more confidence on camera. Whether your goal is to be a confident public speaker, a confident storyteller, or a better presenter for your team, I can help you out. Stay with us until the very end because Porsché has a wonderful giveaway you just don't want to miss. So great to talk with you, Porsché. Welcome to our workshop today.
Hello, Cheryl. How you doing?
Hi, it's so good to talk with you. And we had the opportunity to talk just a little bit before we went live. And story, as you know, is so important. But I think one of the most important things about story is it helps us bring our heart out. It helps us bring our emotion out to more people. And I know that through your presentation today, you'll be able to share that. And I know you'll be able to also share your story with everyone as well. But why do you love stories so much?
Ooh, man, that's a good one. I've always been obsessed. And when I say obsessed, I mean obsessed with storytelling, even as a child. I loved reading books, and I ended up having a difficult upbringing around my teens. And so I really used stories as a form of escape and even to learn about the world as a whole. And it was really powerful. And at that point, I really started to understand how we are able to draw emotion from storytelling. People have been doing it for years, so it only makes sense that no matter where we are in the world, we can all be impacted by each other's stories.
I think that is so true. I think too that when you meet strangers, you probably aren't going to share a story right off the bat. It is more like, hi, how are you? Where are you from? What do you do for a living? Just like I asked here in the chat for those joining us. But when you get the opportunity to share a story in however way makes the most sense, you really
Mhm.
get a feeling of what that person is like. You really get a sense of what that person believes in, even in that short conversation, if you're able to get to that point, get past the where do you live? And, oh, how many kids do you have? That kind of thing. Like, not that that's
Yeah.
not important, but once you get past that surface stuff, being able to tell a story really creates that connection with somebody.
I definitely agree. And that's why I like to always kind of refer back to that one thing that we can all relate to. When you get on a plane and you sit next to a person you don't know, and in that flight, by the time you get off the plane, you feel like you've known this person forever. That's because you
Mhm.
had the opportunity to actually share stories with each other and get
Yeah.
past that whole, you're a stranger, I'm a stranger, I don't know you, let's not talk. Right? You
Yeah.
get past that barrier, that wall, and you start to be vulnerable with one another, get to know each other. And it's powerful, especially when you do that with a stranger, somebody you hadn't met before.
Mhm. And it's a captive audience. You really can't go anywhere, and the stories that you share are brand new with each other. I just remember my last experience on a plane and really getting to know the person next to me, my seatmate, and that was so much fun. I mean, we traded phone numbers and we took pictures of each other. Like, that was so much fun. But without being vulnerable, it makes it really difficult to have that connection. So, yeah, I love that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You have a great presentation today, how to use your story to create videos that guarantee impact. And I know that our audience today is excited to learn from you. So please take it away.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. And I want to welcome all of you and thank you so much for being here. Now, you get to hear my credentials a little bit later on. We're not going to do that right now. Right now, I want to tell you my story. My name is Porsché Mysticque Steele. I grew up in the USA, born and raised Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I had a great childhood. But when I turned 16, things took a turn for the worse. My family, we moved to Southern California, and I thought I was going to dive into the glitz and glamour of Hollywood. We all feel that way, don't we? When we think about California, that's what we think. But that's not what happened. Things actually got kind of strange. I found myself in an oppressive household, not being able to go out like I wanted to, not being able to socialize or have an even, have a social media presence. Something so simple as connecting with somebody outside of my family, I was deprived of that. I couldn't have a job. I wasn't allowed to go to college. There was so much that I couldn't do. And so there I was, inside these four walls that felt like a prison. Now I was with my family, but what they didn't know was that I was also being abused sexually and emotionally. And it was hard. Now we would go through life pretending like nothing happened and everything was normal and we were a big happy family, but that wasn't the truth. And only those on the inside knew the truth. And we had to hide it from everybody. So the head of my household, what did he do? Well, he kept us from everybody so that we couldn't share our story. So we couldn't talk about the things that were actually happening. Eventually, I decided I can't take this anymore. I needed an outlet of some sort. So I used to sneak online. Yes, sneak online. I would grab a laptop and just read stories from people all over the world, completely unpublished. And I was reading them on Goodreads and Wattpad, right? These are platforms that people use to just write out nonsense, their journal entries, their hearts, their thoughts. Everything was going there. And here I was getting a front row seat to the stories of people from all around the world. And it was powerful. But it let me know that there was a whole world out there that I had never experienced. There was so much more that I could achieve, but I wasn't. So in 2019, after having dabbled my way through online, finding love online, I decided we got to get out of here. But it wasn't just me. It was also my elder sister who had experienced abuse 10 times worse than I had. She told me, Porsché, either we leave this or I take my life. And that was all she needed to say for me to make the decision for us to go. So July 11th, 2019, and yes, that was only 4 years ago, we packed our bags and we left. Now, I had found love online with a Nigerian man who I was head over heels in love with. So, in that time, while I was dabbling online and experiencing these stories, I was also able to edit them. See, I've always been naturally good at editing. So, I decided to create an Upwork profile and freelance as an editor. And I had earned $14,000. But because we weren't actually in the world, I didn't have a bank account. I didn't have a credit score. I didn't really exist. So no bank would allow me to open an account. So that money, 14 grand, was stacking up in a PayPal account, just sitting there.
Hmm.
So when my sister said what she said, we took that money and we left. $14,000 in our pockets and nothing but a beautiful future ahead of us. What did I do? I bought a first class ticket to Nigeria to see the guy that I had fallen in love with. And lo and behold, the day that I arrived, he proposed to me. I said yes. We got married 3 months later, and I never left. Now here I am, still currently in Southeast Nigeria, thriving in my business as a book coach, an independent book publishing expert, And I am helping people tell their stories in a form of a book. That's my story. And you all have heard it. Now I want to ask you a question. How many of you would say that you were moved by my story? You can just drop a yes in the chat or raise your hand. Cheryl, I see you. You were moved by my story. Go
Porsche,
ahead.
thank you so much for sharing your story and your truth. And I'm so very sorry for the pain that you and your family were dealing with. And your bravery is inspiring.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm seeing all the yeses. Okay. Number 2, how many of you thought of yourself or someone you knew when you heard my story? How many of you thought of yourself or somebody you know inside my story? I'm seeing the hand raises. Okay. Question number 3, how many of you now feel more connected to me now that you know my story? I'm seeing the messages in the chat. Yes.
Yeah, we should see a lot of yeses here. We should see a lot of capital yeses.
Yes, there it is. I'm seeing all the yeses. Because I shared my story with you, the simple truth is that I am now unforgettable to you. You are now never going to forget my story. You're going to see my name, you're going to see my face, and you're going to be like, I know her story. Because when we share our stories, we become unforgettable to the people who hear it. That is the power of storytelling. I'd like to share my screen if that's okay at this point, Cheryl.
Yes, please. What else will you tell us?
Well, let me just give you a little bit about my credentials as I talked about. So you know who I was back in 2019. Let me tell you a little bit about me now. Next slide. So yes, my name is Porsché Mysticque Steele. I'm an award-winning book coach, TEDx speaker, independent book publishing expert, and I have published over 50 books for authors all around the world. Keep clicking. There it is. Me as a TEDx speaker. I've published over 50 books. And I have been featured in a number of publications, including Inspire Magazine, Business Insider, LA Weekly, New York Weekly, CEO Weekly, US Reporter, and more. That's me. Now I want to know who you are, right? This is all about storytelling. So in order for us to really share our stories with each other, we have to ask ourselves, what is storytelling? Next slide, please. Yes. What is storytelling? Now, I decided to go ahead and draft up this definition for all of you so we could understand exactly what it is. We'll click to the next slide. There's a little delay here. There it is. The definition of storytelling is the interactive art of using words and actions to reveal the elements and images of a story while encouraging the listener's imagination. This is so powerful to me, and it's important for us to understand how this works. Now, I've highlighted a few words here, starting with interactive art. When you are telling your story, it's all about creating that imagination. And in order to do that, you have to be interactive. That's why it's important for us to use our voices or even use the written word, or most importantly, using video to really describe that story and bring it to life. Because when you do that, the listener's imagination, man, their wheels are turning, right? They're able to picture this thing in their heads, and that's what makes it unforgettable. Next slide, please.
And I have to say, Porsche, that one of our viewers, 9 Dots, called you a visual storyteller. And I think that's such a key point is you are a talking head and you were telling your story with you on camera, but with your words, you were able to paint a picture of what you were talking about, and we were able to sort of see it as you were describing it. I was kind of thinking about you traveling and getting on the plane for the first time and, and all of that. And I think people can really not only see that in their own minds, but they also connect with you because of the story and the pictures you were able to paint through your words.
Absolutely. I definitely agree. There's a lot of power behind visually creating the story as opposed to just verbally creating it, because on paper or even when it's oral, you really leave it up to the listener to determine what it should look like, right? And they
Mm.
get to use their imagination, and that does help with the audience's memory. They're more likely to remember that thing because they thought of it themselves. But visual storytelling is also really powerful because when they don't have to think of the thing themselves and it's in front of them, they're really focused on what it is that you want them to see. And that's powerful for delivering your message. But I think it's also important for us to understand that it's not easy. I know a lot of us say that. It's like, listen, Porsché, I get it. You want me to tell my story? I can do that. I think it's difficult. And so many people actually fail at being able to create impact through storytelling. So, why? Number one, they just want to talk about themselves. I don't know about you guys, but if you have ever sat down and listened to somebody go on and on about their story, you're like, okay, yeah, thank you so much. But hello, I'm over here. I'm the audience. What about me? You do not want to create that disconnect between you and your audience. It's about them, not you so much. Yes, it's your story, but your story has a point. Number two, why do so many people fail? Next slide. The story doesn't have a point. Oh my gosh, I can't tell you how many times I'll listen to somebody and they're talking in circles. And I say to myself, can you please just get to the point? Like, you don't want to tell somebody to can you stop talking? But it's like, hello, why are you telling me this? Why do I care? Right? Get to the point. Number three, it's long and meaningless. Sometimes people tell really long stories and it has a point, but that point just doesn't matter to you. And at the end of the day, you're like, that was a waste of time. It was meaningless to you. It had nothing for you. I have to say, my grandmother, I love her dearly. May she rest in peace. But she was one of those people. She would talk forever. And by the time she got to the point, I was like, Lord have mercy. That is what you were trying to tell me this whole time? It was long and meaningless. And number four, why so many people fail at being able to tell their stories is that it's confusing and it goes in circles, right? Not only do you want to get to the point, you want to be succinct, you want to have that point in place, but you don't want to say too much information that is not relevant to what the audience is supposed to get out of it. You don't want to talk in circles. Keep it a straight, linear story. It has a beginning, it has a middle, it has an end. Boom, bam, bam, you're done, right? So thank you so much, Bruno. I really, really have always been fully obsessed with storytelling, and it's been really important to me. But I think we need to understand the history behind it, right? Because we talk about storytelling nowadays and we talk about it in terms of social media. How can we tell our stories on platforms like Facebook and Instagram? But let's just go back maybe several centuries, maybe a millennia or two. The truth is, storytelling has always been an integral part of communication since the dawn of mankind. Visual storytelling, as you mentioned, Cheryl, it
Mhm.
predates oral and written storytelling. This means that human beings have perfected visual storytelling for centuries. Now, we all just show up on social media and we say, oh, I don't know how to be a visual storyteller. I don't know how to make it work. But guess what? Mankind figured out how to do this from like day one. We're talking about paintings inside cave walls. Using that type of art is part of storytelling. That is part of visual storytelling. So I want to, sure, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to say before we move on.
Well, I loved what Dr. Patricia Rogers said. She said that as you were discussing story and being able to tell the stories within your business, it's called branding. If we're in business, which many of us are, we all should have a story to share. Being vulnerable is essential to grabbing the attention of our audience. And I think part of what I know you're going to be talking about is finding the right stories and maybe being the right level of having the right level of vulnerability and sharing of yourself that creates that connection. That's
Absolutely.
what you were able to do right in the very, very beginning. So, as far as this branding piece of it, that sounds so businessy and so corporate like. What really I think you're talking about is connection. So I
Mm,
love what you're talking about, and I love how you're going to help us figure out those pieces that need to come out when we're either sitting in the middle seat of a plane, or we're at the grocery store, or we're at the playground with our kids. But having a way to have meaningful conversation, that to me is kind of what the crux of today's session is.
absolutely. And I'm glad you led us right into that next part because, ladies and gentlemen, what if I told you that the structure used in the world's most impactful books can be used to create meaningful and engaging content?
I can't
What
wait.
would you say to that, right? The world's most impactful books can be used to create meaningful and engaging content. In truth, video scripts and inspiring books are incredibly similar. You have video scripts on one side, right? When you're using your big view teleprompter, you got it up there, you're reading it, and it feels good. It's the same thing that people do in inspiring books. So let's break that down for a second. An impactful book that is meant to transform or develop the reader, it must include two things. And I'm going to show you. Let's share screen one more time. Your story plus your wisdom equals impact. Plain and simple. There it is. This is the secret sauce behind creating meaningful content. All you have to do is combine your story with your wisdom, and that's how you get the impact. Now, if you're just telling your story in a book, what do we call that? Cheryl, do you know? Pop quiz.
I
If you're
mean, just
only
like, yeah, just a chronological telling of like the dates in your life, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's a memoir, right?
Yeah.
If you're only telling your story in a book, it's a memoir. Now, if you're only giving your knowledge or your expertise in a book, what's that called? It's a textbook.
Yeah.
It's a textbook. It's
Or,
a textbook.
or it could be fiction. You could call it fiction too.
It could be fiction, right? But no, that would be nonfiction, right? So nonfiction would be the textbook. But what we're talking about is creating impact. You don't want to just tell your story because people get bored. Unless you're a celebrity or an influencer, people don't care what's happening in your everyday life. I'm sorry. It may be awesome, but it's going to be really hard to grab the attention of the larger audience. And if you're only giving your wisdom, it's boring, okay? I'm gonna feel like I'm in a lecture hall and I'm sitting there with a professor and I want to fall asleep and I want to scroll through my phone. I could just check out. You don't want to tell only one. You have to combine them both. Now, I'm going to show you how this actually worked. I have two examples for you. First, let's start with one of my favorite authors, James Baldwin, right? James Baldwin wrote The Fire Next Time. Now, this is a great example of how he used his story and his wisdom inside of a book to create impact. Now, The Fire Next Time is on the list of 100 greatest books of all time. That's because it changed so many lives. It changed the way people see racism in America. Very powerful stuff, right? But that book, The Fire Next Time, is a blend of two essays that he wrote, right? My Dungeon Shook, Letter to My Nephew on the 100th Anniversary of the Emancipation. That's essay number one. And then essay number two was Down at the Cross, Letter from a Region of My Mind. Now, both essays teach the reader about the raw and power, the rawness and power of fear and how fear serves as the foundation for racism, toxic relationships, religious beliefs, and traditions. Now, the overall message of that book was very clear, yet he delivered it through the use of storytelling. So Baldwin recounts specific moments in his life where fear is the motivating factor for various traumatic moments that he experienced. But then he goes on to break down those moments intellectually and practically to drive the point and help it apply to the reader. That is a 1-2 punch of impact. He took his story and he broke it down and he shared his knowledge behind it. Now let's go to somebody completely different. Joan Didion, right? Joan Didion is like the grandmama of grief. She taught us all how to deal with grief through her book, The Year of Magical Thinking. So in that book, Joan takes readers through her experience with grief and mourning during the year after her husband's death. Now, with a story like that, Joan could have just left it as a memoir. She could have just said, this is what I experienced. My husband died. It was terrible. I hated it. These are all the things that happened to me because of it. And we would probably be entertained as readers. Like, that would have been entertaining. We would have felt it. We really would have connected with her. But that's not enough. And Joan, I feel like she knew it. Instead, she incorporated her personal analysis of her grief. And then she backed it up with psychological and medical research and explanations. Now, that helped the reader to understand their own mourning. And now that book is used as a way for people to overcome their grief. And it's not just about Joan, it's also about you, the reader. Now, in addition to the knowledge and information that she gives in her book, there is an entirely new element to that. And that was the fact that she became a Pulitzer Prize winner because of that book. So look at the impact that she was able to generate. And now it is the go-to book to help people deal with grief. And that's powerful.
I love what you said. I love your examples and how the storytellers are telling stories, but they're really bringing in their audience into the story and really thinking about the impact of their story on the people reading, watching, listening, and really connecting with that story. And I think, as we were talking about earlier, stories are great because people connect with you. But when you have a conversation, when you really have a way for the audience to connect with you, and I think by that impact part of it, by sharing your wisdom and how it connects with the audience, I think you have that come full circle. So yeah, thank you. That's wonderful. Yeah.
Thank you so much. All right, let's share screen again, because now we're talking about books, but now let's talk about video content. Now, these are my two favorite influencers, if you will, on Instagram, Alex Hormozi and Michelle Obama. Okay, two completely different people.
Very different. Wow, so different.
Very different. But here's what I love about both of them, that they are able to generate so much impact that leads to action that it is sickening, but like in a good way. Okay, I mean sickening in a good way. What Alex Hormozi is able to do, let's just break him down really quick. Alex Hormozi is the CEO and founder of acquisitions.com, right? So basically he's buying and selling businesses. That's the name of the game. But then he wrote a book, $100 million Offers, and he recently released the book, $100 million Leads. So I have been a huge Alex Hormozi fan since he released the first book. But then I started following him on Instagram, and I was like, why do I like this guy so much? He is like super buff, which is not usually my thing. Like, I'm not into fitness. Let's be real. I am not into fitness, so I don't need to like follow him. But he is so powerful in these 30-second clips that he has, because he is giving you so much information while telling his story. I mean, one of my most favorite clips of him is when he's talking about his relationship with his wife. Now, you would think, why do I need to know that, Alex? I'm here to learn how to scale my business. But he talks about having that woman at his back, and that's what he was able to use to scale his business. Really pertinent information. He drops in the figures and stuff and how he scaled to 6 figures, whatever. All the numbers are there, but the story was there first. And that's what's powerful. Then you have Michelle Obama. Michelle Obama has been open about herself, her marriage, and her life from day one. Most people were even taken aback by that level of vulnerability from the first lady. How crazy is that? But she actually used it to her advantage. So she was able to take bits and pieces of her story and share it in segments. Yes, she eventually wrote the book, but we had already been following her before Becoming came out. Becoming came out in 2018, but I mean, we've been following her since 2008. That's 10 years of getting to know this woman's story in pieces. And she backed up her story with the things that she had learned along the way. What makes her an expert in health and fitness and all this other stuff is all based on her story. So when she takes the two and she combines them, it blows minds. And you could be doing the same thing with your content. Combine the wisdom with the story. Voila, you have meaningful content that is guaranteed to create impact. I'll drop it right there before we move on to the next one. Cheryl, I would love to know what you think about
I do
that.
follow Alex and of course Michelle. I actually have not followed her on Instagram, so I need to follow her on Instagram. I think I'm just as an audience member listening, it feels like they are, and I'm just sort of listening what's in my head as I'm listening to this. They seem to already have established audiences. And so when you're thinking about business owners here in our community, maybe they're wondering, well, I don't have the same types of stories. I don't have the same, I think at this point, Alex says he has an 8-figure business. I don't have that right this minute. So what stories are impactful for the audience who I'm trying to attract? And so how do you help them with that when you work with people who are, maybe beginning their journey, beginning their career, maybe even in the middle, but maybe not exactly at the level of like an Alex or a Michelle? How do you help them find those stories to share?
Well, I have a 5-step process that actually helps people discover the story and share it. So let's click to the next slide and we're going to get right into it. How do you determine the story that you are meant to tell? First and foremost, you have to get clear on the problem that your audience has. And Cheryl, I think this is a direct answer to the question that you had. Why is it that Alex and Michelle are able to create such impact in their storytelling? Because they're very clear on the problem that their audience has. They know what the issue is, and they know that their stories have the ability to fill that. Their knowledge has the ability to solve that problem. So when you're clear, you know what to present to them. So let's say, for example, you're in the space of financial wellness, but you're not going to share a story about how it took you 20 days to learn how to tie your shoes, because that has nothing to do with financial wellness. You probably want to tell a story about how you were broke, maybe living in I don't know, whatever it is, right? Section 8 housing, trailer park, whatever your story is that talks about the problem that your audience member has, because you want to be relatable. And that's the goal of storytelling, is to really develop that connection and become relatable. So get clear on that problem so you know how to relate to them. Then number 2, you need to articulate a solution to that problem. There it is. Articulate a solution to that problem for yourself. It's really important that you are able to say what the solution is, because a lot of times in the industries that we're in, we know, up here in our heads, how to solve a problem that somebody has. But if you can't articulate that, you're not really going to know how to present that help to them. So get clear on the problem that they have and then articulate that to yourself. Then number 3, what do they need to know in order to understand that solution? Now, this is a big one. There it is. This is a really big one, because we as experts, we know all the lingo, right? We got all the information. We know how to get from point A to point B, right? But your audience members, they don't know that stuff. They don't know the lingo. They don't know what they don't know. So you have to ask yourself, what is it that our audience members need to know in order to understand the solution? So I'm just going to give you a quick analogy. Let's imagine for a second that we're driving in a car. You have somebody behind the wheel and you are in the passenger seat. And your job is to have them follow the map, but they don't know where they're going, right? This is a surprise. You're going to take them somewhere. Now, you can just say, all right, I need you to make a left turn and a right turn and a left turn and a right turn and a left turn and a right turn and a left turn and a right turn. that would be great because that's very simple. But if you say, all right, go down East Street and then turn on Jeffrey Road and then turn on Iris Lane, like, I don't know where those places are. This is not helpful, right? You got to give it to them very simply. Left, right, left, right, left, right. That's language that we all know. So what is it that they need to know to understand the solution? Then you can educate them on that. Number 4. Now, this is the most important one. You need to think of an overcoming triumph story that relates to the problem they have. Now, this right here is going to be your most impactful story, right? So, as I mentioned, every story has to have a point that when you tell your story, it directly correlates to the problem that they have. And it's not going to be off the top of your head, ladies and gentlemen. You're going to have to take some time to sit down and really think this through. Think of that story that relates to the problem that they have in which you succeeded. What is that thing? Because that thing, that story that you tell is going to give them their aha moment. And that's why it's going to be the most impactful story, because they're going to be like, oh my gosh, I'm exactly where Cheryl was. And she was able to overcome it because of X, Y, and Z. If Cheryl can do it, I can do it. And then there's this whole inspiration thing that starts happening. You have to have that story in place. And then finally, number 5, practice, practice, practice. Okay. Our stories that we have are difficult to tell. The story that I told earlier, you think I woke up one morning and I was able to say some of the things that I've been through? Of course not. It was so hard. It took me 4 years to be able to finally express the things that were happening at home. It was difficult and I did it, but I had to practice, practice, practice. So get clear on the problem your audience has. Articulate a solution to that problem. Then ask yourself, what does my audience need to know to understand the solution? Think of an overcoming triumph story that relates to the problem, and then practice, practice, practice.
Those are so good, actually, as people I think are sitting here and listening to you talk, Porsche, and trying to figure out the parts of their story that may connect with whatever they do, whether it's public relations or law or accounting or whatever the types of businesses and the business owners who we have here in our community. And I wonder, as you coach your students and clients, what do you say to them about vulnerability? Like, how vulnerable is too vulnerable when sharing your story as it connects to an outcome? So a story, XYZ story related to selling accounting services or construction services or whatever. Like, how do those things connect? Can you just help us understand that?
Yeah, like as I mentioned, it's really important that you make sure that your story is directly related to the problem that they have. So you basically want to have a story very similar to your perfect client. So whatever they're going through, you probably have gone through that same thing. That's why you're in the space that you're in. And that's the story that you tell. Now, as far as vulnerability, that's a tricky one because some people can really get turned off when their coach or somebody they consider an expert gets a little too vulnerable. The good thing about now, I would say today, 2023, most people expect vulnerability. If you are not vulnerable, they're like, they're hiding something. I don't want to hear it, So it's really good to have that transparency. But the one thing that I will say, when deciding how far to actually go or how deep into your pain you should share, it should all be based on whether or not you're fully healed from it. If you're not fully healed, don't talk about it. Because the last thing you want to do, and is actually, I'm parroting a person that I had recently had a conversation with. We both spoke at an event, and this was a question that came up. And she said, you don't want to bleed on the people that you're supposed to help. Oh. And I thought that was so powerful because it's true. If you're not healed from your pain, you can bleed on other people. You can bring them down and put them in a place where they feel like there's no way out, right? But if you're fully healed from that thing and you've learned from it, then you should tell the story in full. Don't hold back. Don't skip out. Don't lie and try to make it sound good. Say exactly what happened because you're healed at that point. And from there, you can be inspired. You can be helpful. So I
And
think
as
that's
you mentioned earlier, that's the wisdom that you're imparting. That is the lesson you're sharing. And that is potentially what the audience will get. They'll get that impact because
yeah.
you as the storyteller are sharing your truth, honestly. Lanisha says, I love it. It's a great recipe to an impactful and visual story. So congratulations. As far as any questions, if anybody has any questions, please post that here. And Robert Kennedy III, who is also a host here for Big Views, says, quick drop in, doing workshop today, but he and everybody knows that he loves this topic as well. And so he's going to have to come back and watch this because storytelling is definitely his jam. So anyway, if you've got any questions, please post them in the chat if you have anything for Porsche. So here's a question. As far as storytelling, sometimes people feel like they don't have the right stories, right? I don't have an exciting life. I don't have anything to offer anybody else. I'm imagining maybe these are things that you might hear from students and clients. And maybe there are people who are thinking that, who just in general, like, I'm not really sure what stories to tell. I'm not that exciting. I don't think you are, by the way. I don't think anybody's not exciting, but what would you tell them? How would you help them dig deep to find the appropriate things that make that wonderful connection?
I mean, I do hear it a lot, and it always kind of pains me to hear that. It kind of hurts because I never want a person to think that their story isn't traumatic enough or it's not sad enough, so then it's not worth sharing. But that's not true. I think that's the power of storytelling, is that you tell your story for a reason, whether it's super sad or super exciting. You know that somebody else is going to relate to that. And that's why you're telling it, because somebody is where you were. So when you tell, even if it's exciting, you still need to share it. I'll give you an example. I had a conversation with a woman who was telling me her brand story, and I fully expected it to be sad because people love sharing their story when they're sad, because that's what we are taught, that be vulnerable with something sad, make them cry. That's what you want to do, make them cry. So I was preparing for the tears. I had my Kleenexes on the side and everything. But then she shared her brand story, and it was just about how she was an at-home mom and she loved life and she loved her children. But one day she saw that her son was playing with some marbles, and she realized, I really love playing with these marbles, but I don't want him to choke on it. And so she developed a product that would allow children to play with small things safely. Now, I don't think she's released it yet, so I can't say what that product is.
Sure, no. What a great product, though. Go ahead.
Right, right. But I was like, that's an incredible story. And she can go around and tell people that story. And she's a business coach. So she teaches people how to tell their brand story. So here she is telling people, no matter how sad your story may be or how vibrant and exciting it is still enough to get somebody to take action. So she had this powerful story about what she saw her child doing, and that's how she was able to invent a product. So what does she do? She tells people about that. And when they hear that, they're like, oh, I can do the same thing. They start looking around their house and looking at my kids, and it's like, what can I do? What can I invent based on what's around me? So it doesn't always have to be sad. Your story simply needs to speak to a problem that a person has.
And the emotion. Like, I think as you were describing that story, and we're all thinking, what can we invent right now? I'm looking around my house. It really is just the emotion that you're sparking, or that she was able to generate by telling that story. We've got another comment from You Grow Flower. You are amazing. That's you, Porsche. I love Don't Bleed on People Who You Are Trying to Help. Little heart. That's so good.
Thank you.
These are great comments. So good. So as far as books, so I know that you are helping people tell stories which work on video, but essentially they really also work in the written form. What are some tips, some things that people should keep in mind as you're thinking about creating stories or thinking about the stories in your own life that translate either on video or through the written word? What are some tips or tricks that people can keep in mind as they're mining their brain for the stories that might help connect with their audiences?
Right. I mean, there are definitely two different types of people, those who consume the video content and those who like to read the books. I mean, it can still be the same person, but there are two different intentions. So when you're telling your story in video content form, you know, you got to be quick and snappy. You got to get it out there. You got to catch them. You got 7 seconds before somebody just decides to scroll away. But in a story, you really have a different type of intention. This person is really ready to sit down and dive into what you get to tell them or what's in it for them. I think it's really important for people to understand that when you're going to write a book, it's not about you. Keep the reader in mind. Readers are selfish. I mean, hey, they went out of their way to spend the time to read and or listen to your book and to buy the book. It's not social media. It's not video where, 7 seconds, they're not going to care. 10 seconds is not a lot of time. But when somebody's reading, they mean business and you have to give them that. So you have to be fully selfless. Now, we are all entrepreneurs here. And I think it's really important to understand that video content lasts for as long as it is relevant. Books is the opposite. Books can last forever. They are meant to. It's meant to be a generational item and it's meant to be globally impactful. So when you write a book, you understand that you should leverage that book in your business. Too many people actually have books and then they do nothing with them. So you want to use your book in your business and understand that every book has 13 streams of income. You should be earning about $10,000 from every book you release. If you're not, that's because you're not tapping into those 13 streams of income, then you're kind of missing out. So it's really important to combine the video content to get people to just kind of get to know you and then funnel them into buying the book so that they can know, like, and trust you.
And so what it sounds like you're saying is they're two different things. Maybe the same story can be applied for both ways, but there are two different ways to connect with an audience and create income for your business. So lots of comments here from 9 Dots. Story matters. It's the best way to communicate, period. Guy Jazzy says readers want to know what is in it for them. Trinity Strategic Consulting is saying my business mentor turned me onto a TEDx talk to help me embrace storytelling in my business messaging. And then I've got a question from Keitha, and you kind of, you touched on it a little bit, but I'm wondering if you have a little bit more you'd like to expound on. How do you keep telling the same story without it boring your current audience in video content form? So if, as we're talking about, right, you were saying earlier, as you wanted to tell it differently in your book than you would on video, but how do you keep it from boring? Not that it's boring, but how do you keep it from being boring when you turn it into the video format?
Yeah, this is a good one because, we're always having to create new content, but we're not always creating our origin stories. Our origin story is what it is. It's not going to change no matter how many times you tell it. But that's the thing about social media is that your audience is usually always growing. So there's always going to be new people on your platform who don't quite know you. For those who do know you, they know your story. And if it's a powerful story that speaks to them, no matter how many times they hear it, they're not going to get bored. I have people who've been following me for years. They're not tired of my story. They know it. And every time they hear it, they're like, wow, yeah, that's Porsche. They're not bored because I'm not telling a story for the sake of telling it. I'm telling it to speak to a problem that you have. So if you listen to me tell my story in 2020 and you are still where you are by 2023, and you hear my story again, that should give you even more excitement to take the next step and get out of where you currently are. So for me, I like telling the same story over and over again because it drives impact and it gets new people to get to know you. So I wouldn't worry about it. Don't worry too much about whether or not your story is boring. As long as it speaks to the problem that they have, it will always resonate, always.
I love what you just said because it's not even that you're saying it exactly in the same way. I think we always evolve too as storytellers. So the bones may be the same as far as the story you're telling, but the way you tell it could be different. Maybe you told the same story in 2022, but you're telling it a little bit differently here at the end of 2023. And then it's another similar question, but I'm going to share it from Nautic Dixon's because it ties to what you just said. How then do you share your one story cross-platform, from documentary to a book to a course to a guide, etc.? And so, as you said, you're jumping up and down because I
I'm
know what you're about
excited.
to say on stage, but it kind of ties into that, doesn't it? It's like it's the same
Yeah.
story, but not really. So how would you then help us share that in a more impactful way in all of those different places?
That is such an exciting question for me because I love doing that. I love sharing my story in all of these different formats. So, the story, like I said, the story itself doesn't change. But it's true, how you tell it, in a sense, may change depending on the call to action. So each
Mm,
format has a different intention, right? A documentary usually is to educate and entertain. A book is usually to transform and drive impact. And a guide is to give you direct results, right? So the call to action is different. So there are going to be different parts of your story that you get to tell. And of course, different ways. So I'll give you an example. So the story that I told you about how I spent my teen years and how I left home, I have, first and foremost, wait, let me not jump the gun here. It's important to understand that we have all lived lives that consist of multiple stories. So whether you believe it or not, you have multiple different stories that you can tell. But I digress. Going back to my story at the beginning. Now, it doesn't really speak to how to write a book. I tell that story to let people know that we all have powerful stories that we can tell. So when I told my story in my video feeds, it was like super short. I was like, I came to Nigeria in 2019. I met my husband. We got married. I never left. And that was it. Like, I skipped everything before that. Then
yeah.
when I wrote an ebook, I had a quick ebook guide to help you, to teach you everything you need to know about independent publishing. And at the end, my call to action was get to know me so we can work together. So I just said, I was born and raised in Pittsburgh. This is what I went through. This is my life. It's exciting. Now you know me. I want to know you. Then in my book, The CEO Author, I told my story in chapter 5 to teach you, the reader, how to tell your story and drive impact. So I use my own story as an example. So you see, the CTA is different, same story, but it has a different feeling. And it's also important to know that you are likely to have different people consume the different types of content. So somebody who watched the documentary may not get that guide because they got the documentary and from right there they became a client. Or they read the book and right there they became the client. So they didn't need the short videos that you do. But anyways, the point is that the CTA will determine how you tell the story naturally. So you don't have to worry about that.
So good. So good. All right. We are getting to the end of our time together. This has been fabulous. And I know you have a really special giveaway for those who are joining us. So how can people, A, learn more about you, and B, get on board with that giveaway that you're sharing?
I love it. Yes. Well, you guys see my name on the screen. Go ahead and write that down, type it into your phone, and give it a quick Google search. You'll see the little button there. So, there's the link. Bruno's a genius.
Thank you,
Okay, sorry.
Bruno. I know. So good.
There's the link. Find out more about me at PorscheSteele.com. I'm all over the socials. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. You can just type in my name and find me there. Now, I do have 2 giveaways. Am I allowed to talk about both of them?
Feel free.
Okay. Giveaway number 1. I mentioned my book, The CEO Author. I hope you guys can see that if my ring light isn't misbehaving. The
Yep.
CEO Author, a business owner's guide to expanding your thought leadership with a book. Very simple, step-by-step instructions on how to actually find your story, perfect your story, and write it in a book, and then leverage your book in your business. I mentioned to you that every book has 13 streams of income. I tell you about it in here, and I want to give it to you for free. So just click that link right there and use discount code BIGVIEW to get your copy of the CEO Author for free. Just pay shipping and handling. It's all yours. Then the second giveaway, this is the one I'm most excited about because then I get to meet you guys. I want to meet all of you who joined us here today. So I have 3 free strategy sessions available for you. All you got to do is fill out that form and see if you qualify. We can have a conversation to determine what your story is. We're going to dig deep on those calls, okay? I want to know what is going on in your world. What is your most impactful story, and how can we tell it the right way? So just click that link, fill out that form, see if you qualify, and I'm going to choose the top 3 amazing people who I'm going to work with in that free strategy session.
Oh, that's wonderful. I think people will just want to fill that out to have a conversation with you. The energy is infectious. So definitely fill out the form, get Porsche's book, and thank you for joining. The comments were on fire today. And I feel as I'm listening, well, as I'm going through the comments, I think people are really thinking about the stories within their business. So if you really think about these workshops, they really are an opportunity for you to connect with experts, to think about the stories that you have and how you can use video using Big View, how to use a book like Porsche talks about, but how to reach your audience in a greater and more impactful way. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you, Bruno, as always, for being so amazing. Porsche, thank you for your expertise, for your time, for your giveaways. If you want to reach out with me, I have a free 15-minute video audit. You can catch me on LinkedIn and just reach out to me. Give me a takeaway that you got from this session, and I'm happy to share with you a link to book a call for a free video audit. Until next time, we'll catch you then. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you are thinking about the stories within your business that you can share with the world. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Can own any room you walk into and instantly show up as the leader in your space. Hi, I'm Cheryl Tan. I'm a former TV news anchor turned entrepreneur, and I love working with leaders to help them develop 3 pillars of communication success: messaging, presentation, and strategy. Does this sound like you? You aren't sure how to look professional on stage or on camera, and that impacts how confident you feel showing up at all. You don't know how to describe what you do simply and clearly. You are most certainly an expert in your industry, but you haven't figured out yet how to explain that better. And finally, you don't have a presence anywhere, or at least an online presence you're proud of, which means you need to figure out how you want to show up and what you need to do to create that platform. My custom plan focuses on your message, your presentation, and your strategy. Once those 3 things are working for you, you will get noticed by the right people and opportunities. The best way to see if we're a fit is to have a conversation. Go to CherylTanMedia.com/consultation to book a call. I can't wait to hear your story.
Teleprompter, create videos you're proud of. Easily trim your video by selecting the words where you want to start and end. Color your presentation with automatic subtitles and highlighting keywords. Add your brand logo. Add music for an emotional touch. Add your contact info on an animated business card on all your videos. Easily replace green screen with an image or a video loop. Stand out with a web page with your logo, your video at the center, and personalized button for visitors to interact. It's one tap to simultaneously upload your videos on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Always know what to say next with the Big View teleprompter.